This episode of the Creep Street Podcast is brought to you by Martini Coffee Roasters. You know, people always look at me weird when I say I start off every morning with a big old martini. But then I set them straight, and I tell them I'm talking about Martini Coffee Roasters coffee. A delicious coffee made by the Martini family. They roast their coffee using a traditional method of sight and sound to roast those little babies to perfection. And they also sell green coffee beans for those home roasters out there. And right now, fans of the Creep Street Podcast can get 20% off their entire order by using the code CREEPSTREET at martinicoffee.com. Once again, for 20% off your order, use the code CREEPSTREET at martinicoffee.com. Martini Coffee Roasters, the perfect coffee to keep you creeps caffeinated.
You've taken a wrong turn down Creep Street.
Citizens of the Milky Way, this is Maureen Bogey.
And this is Dylan Hackworth.
And you are listening to the Creep Street Podcast.
Ooh, yeah!
I mean, can you even believe it? Gosh, what? This is great. This is exciting news.
Absolutely.
Another episode. Here we go. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in and for listening. Just another little reminder, if you want to follow us on Instagram, we are at Creep Street Podcast. Twitter, we're at Creep Street Pod. Threads, we're at Creep Street Podcast. TikTok, we're at Creep Street Podcast. Facebook, we're at Creep Street Podcast. And feel free to just get on any of those dang socials. Give us a like, give us a follow, give us a comment, whatever you want. I mean, we would love it.
Absolutely, please do.
And, you can see what we're up to. It's usually just kind of cuckoo, just being silly little freaks. But, that's a good time. And also, if one episode a week is just not enough for you.
And it's not.
It's just isn't. Okay? Good. I'm glad we're on the same page. Okay. God. Anyway, so you can get that extra bonus content over at patreon.com/creepstreetpodcast.
That's right.
And there we have all sorts of bonus content that just everyone's gonna love.
Oh, yeah. Sink your teeth into those tasty morsels.
Thank you so much to everyone who listened and also contributed to our Listener Stories episode last week.
And how about those stories, folks? Wow.
Whoa. I love those episodes every year or, every couple times a year we do it. And, it's just the best. So thank you so much to everyone who listened and, of course, contributed. Again, we just love you so much. And, yeah, good times.
Yeah.
So, Dylan.
Yeah.
What are we talking about today, though? Like, what is today's episode about?
Ooh. Folks, we are about to get as weird as Creep Street has ever gotten weird.
Oh, whoa.
Today we are talking about Sinister Stickmen.
I'm excited to learn what the heck is going on.
Well, I'm excited to spread the gospel here a little bit, folks.
Okay.
Let me hit you with my sources here real quick, and let me tell you, there's not a lot out there on this phenomenon.
Oh.
And Maureen can tell you, I've been talking about this one for a while.
Yeah, you really have. And even though you've been talking about it for a long time, I'm going to be honest, I still have no idea what it is in any capacity at all.
Well, allow me to explain it to you, folks. Here are my sources. A couple of articles from Mysterious Universe. One called The Truly Bizarre World of Encounters with Real Stick Figures by Brent Swancer. And then Curiosity Rover discovers strange stick figures on Mars by Brent Tingley. And then a video on YouTube called The Black Stickman Phenomenon, Paranormal Stories by the channel Beyond Creepy. Like I said, not a lot of sources, mostly just like tales, like collections of stories, confessionals, if you will.
Yeah, interesting. And you know what? Isn't that how it all starts?
Absolutely. And let me tell you, folks, buckle up because we are in for a classic case of Creep Street. This one, as all of our favorites do, doesn't fit neatly into a box.
Oh, yeah.
All around the world, people have reported run-ins with what they have described as literally stick figure entities. Yes, that's right, stick figures like you drew when you were a child. You know what I mean? Like you draw on paper. Today, we're going to explore some of these stories and wonder what the hell these things actually are. And like I said, this one gets weird. Let your inhibitions go. Let your preconceived notions, let them go. Wash them away.
Yeah, let's just go for it. I'm ready.
Well, rumblings of encounters with these things began making the rounds in internet forums in the late 2000s. These entities they were reporting on were usually described as very tall and impossibly thin black specters. It's like these things came to life and hopped off of a piece of paper. Many encounters claim that these things were literally two-dimensional, like real stick figures. In some cases, these things were said to be so two-dimensional, it was like they were invisible if you viewed them from certain angles. For example, if you look at a sheet of paper head-on, it's easy to see. But if you look at a sheet of paper from the side, it would be much harder to see. Some sightings even report these things sort of morphing back and forth between 2 and 3 dimensions. The way in which these things move varies as well. Sometimes their movements appear to be disjointed, while others describe their movements as very smooth yet unnatural. When people are in the presence of these things, they will often report feeling dizzy or tired. There's also reported the distinct feeling of a static charge in the air, almost like the air itself is electrified. And while these entities are not known to be violent, people report feeling a sense of malevolence from these things. Almost always, these entities are described as skittish, and almost like they're as surprised to see you as you are to see them. They will take off, vanishing into the night, or sometimes vanishing right in thin air. Now, while stories of these things really didn't start taking off till the late 2000s, sightings of these things go back several decades. One of the first stick figure encounters, though not the first, we'll get to that one later, happened all the way back in 1978 in Kent, England. The story was posted to a forum on 40 Times by a user who went by the name Simon, and here is their tale. A group of about 10 of us were sitting in the Luce Valley at about midnight. After about 45 minutes, Will leapt to his feet, slapping his head, saying there was a bee in his hair. He looked absolutely terrified. Both Dory and I saw the outline of a tall, thin figure wearing a hat, dancing behind him. Will said later it was as if a terrifically loud buzzing was coming up through the top of his head. However, only Rachel heard any buzzing. We partially satisfied ourselves that it must have been a bee's nest, so we moved a little distance away. As we moved away, Dorothy and I saw a ring outlined in the grass which enclosed where we had been sitting. Eventually, it started raining, so we headed to Rachel's house. As we left, I turned around and saw the same thin black figure walk across the opening between the trees to where we had been sitting. Huh. Now, you're going to notice things in each of these stories that sound a little bit like things we've talked about. You're going to notice things that sound like they've come from UFO stories, cryptid stories, from paranormal stories. You're going to hear a lot of that. First of all, this electric buzzing in the air.
Yeah.
Also, what's the deal with the ring around them, where they were sitting?
Right.
It was almost like this thing drew a ritual circle around them, and it was dancing behind them. It makes me think very much of like a John Keel-like entity, a sort of interdimensional trickster sort of entity. It reminds me of Davey Superwell's story that we covered last week about the person walking down the sidewalk. They would see it when it wasn't under a light post, but then when it would walk into the light, it would vanish. Remember that?
Yes, of course. Yeah, I'm definitely intrigued and I'm interested. I still am like, what the heck is going the F on?
Oh, I'm sure. Well, another encounter was posted to the website Listverse. This one happened in 1982, once again in England, in the town of Essex.
Oh, okay. The only way is Essex.
That's right. The witness was working as a nurse at the time, and boy was she shocked when one night, out of the shadows around the hospital, emerged one of these entities. And here is her story. In 1982, when I was a student nurse at Worley Hospital in Brentwood in Essex, England, I encountered a stick person in the grounds of the hospital as I was walking home one night. It lobbed across the roadway, having been seemingly pressed up against a wall. It stopped when it saw me and raised its arms in fright and quickly walked off into the undergrowth. It was very tall, with very thin, extremely long arms and legs and a very small oval head. Totally black, no obvious clothing. I saw no face, even though it emerged very near a street lamp and was so well illuminated. I was terrified, and to this day, no one believes me. Now, it's kind of sad that no one believes her, but
I know, yeah.
Very interesting. And also, notice how almost like comically it runs away.
Yeah.
Almost like a cartoon character.
Right, that's why I'm like, I wonder, I don't know, is this some other being that's just like presenting itself like this to like really mess with people's minds?
Right, or is it like something conjured from a child's like imagination?
Yeah.
Now, what's interesting is that in many of these cases, the encounters happened when the witness was with a child, or the witness themselves was a child. One poster on Reddit told of how they encountered one of these entities when they were a young boy. One evening, he awoke in the night with a heavy sense of dread. He got out of bed to go to his parents' room to sleep with them, but he soon realized he was not alone. And here is what he said happened. When I got out of bed and opened the door, about 5 feet away from me in the hallway was a tall, black, slender figure that was very thin, all black, no facial features, a circled head. The arms and legs were really thin and the fingers looked sharp. It made no sound as it was gliding as it walked. The way it walked was the most scary part for me. I only saw it for 2 seconds, then slammed the door and started wailing and crying. Minutes passed until my mom shows up to my door and calms me down. I don't remember mentioning it to her, so she just thought I had a bad dream. She then got a roll of blankets and put them on the hallway floor for us to sleep together. For some reason, my mom likes to sleep on the floor because she grew up that way. My feet ended up being scratched very badly. It couldn't have been my mom's nails, and I remembered a burning sensation. I'm 18 now, and it's one of the few earliest memories I had. I still live in the same house in Connecticut. So this thing obviously clawed at the child's feet.
That is so... I hate that so fucking much. Like, that is so gross to me.
Yeah,
And
fucking with the child. Messing around with the child. Yeah, go yourself.
What the hell? I don't like that. What the fuck? But also at the same time, it's like, I can see how someone could think that maybe this is just a child having a nightmare. And I'm not saying that's impossible, of course.
Right.
But at the same time, we all know that children are kind of more, in tune with the other side, especially when they're quite young.
Right.
And maybe it's just a really scary experience, and it's like, oh my God.
Yeah, absolutely. And also take note of the word gliding.
Yeah.
You're going to hear that word a lot in how they move.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Well, another poster who goes by the name Amalthea posted about her story on both Reddit and the website True Ghost Stories Archive. This person grew up in California from the years of 1997 to 2004. Her encounter happened one night when she was hanging out with her best friend Jenny. For many years, the witness kept her experience to herself out of fear of being ridiculed. But when she started to see others posting about their experiences with these things, she felt the courage to share her tale. And this is what happened. When I was growing up, I had a best friend who lived down the street. We lived in a quiet, small town where her dad was always working. I would walk to her house every day after school, and we would often take walk to the liquor store to buy candy, etc. I would often see a stick man following us, peeking out from behind her couch, etc. He was all black and changed sizes, sometimes the size of a small cat, other times taller than a normal-sized man. I felt very scared of him and felt he was mischievous at best, perhaps evil. And I finally got the courage to tell my best friend, and she admitted to seeing him too. I always got the feeling he was the same one every time, not different stickmen. One time he appeared in the shape of a stick figure horse, like a bad child's drawing. I always believed him to be somehow following me and watching me.
until when my best friend passed away suddenly our senior year of high school. She had a genetic heart condition that nobody, including herself, had known about. I've never seen what we called Stickman ever since. I believe now that perhaps he was some form of Grim Reaper, awaiting his time to take my friend. I don't know if that's really the case, but it seems odd the sightings of him disappeared after she passed. I never saw who he dubbed Stickman again. I'm researching him now that I'm in my late 20s because I recently confided in my husband about these weird experiences.
Interesting, very sad.
Oh my god, very sad, very scary.
Yes, very scary.
The idea of it changing sizes.
Yeah.
I mean, that was wild.
I don't need that. I don't need it.
I have enough on my plate.
Please.
Oh my god, I have a lot going on. God, but anyway, yeah, that is so scary. And yeah, I understand that, of course, because the sightings of the Stickman stopped after the friend passed away, that I understand how someone could think that
Right.
the Stickman was the reason, maybe not even necessarily the reason for it, but he was there for that reason. He was
Right.
there, like a Grim Reaper or
Yeah,
whatever.
exactly.
I get that, but I just don't get that feeling just deep in my bones. I feel like that was just some nasty motherfucker that I don't know. It's just, I don't know.
It's
I don't
creepy.
know. I don't like it.
It's creepy,
I
folks.
don't like it.
Another poster spoke of an encounter they had when they were also a child, but in this case, her parents were there and also witnessed this thing too. Now, this one is strange.
I noticed something moving very quickly in front of the car. Here's where it gets difficult to describe. What appeared to be two black, stick-like legs, as if the bottom half of a stickman, ran quickly past the car. Everything in that moment seemed to slow down, and I entirely lost my train of thought. The area around my legs even almost seemed static-like and blurry. Neither my mom or dad said anything immediately, so I shrugged it off as looking out in the night at a moving road for too long. But as I started my sentence again, my mom interrupted me. What was that? She genuinely sounded terrified, and I knew immediately what she was talking about. I basically screamed back, "The Stickman?" And my mom began panicking. My dad seemed very confused, and we pulled the car over and we looked around the area where we saw it run. My mom said that she saw an entire Stickman run from one side of the road to another. Tall, lanky, almost two-dimensional, just like a kid's drawing. When she calmed down, she started describing everything about what she saw, including how it walked. This was only about a half a mile from our house, so we drove back, my dad still in a state of confusion, and my mom and I nearly shaking. Ultimately, we all came to the conclusion that everything in that moment was very hazy, as if time slowed down, and we were seeing into another dimension. Why my mom and I saw it and my dad didn't, I still have no idea. Both of my parents are religious people and typically try to debunk stuff like this, but they both agree that there is no way what we saw wasn't otherworldly. We began researching and found that we weren't the only people to ever see the Stickman. When my mom read one post about the way it moved, I saw her heart drop. The post said something about claims of the thing galloping, which is exactly how she described it right after it happened. Normally, I am very interested in stuff like this, but I was so terrified I just wanted to forget it happened. For some reason, something about the situation felt menacing.
Interesting that Dad couldn't see it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Also, there's going to be a lot of this static. You're going to notice also a lot of people noticing them while they're in cars.
Oh, okay.
I mean, there's just a lot to suss out here.
Yeah, I mean, come on. It's very scary for so many reasons. And one of them is the galloping that you just mentioned.
Yes.
That is so scary to me, and I hate that. And then also just the sense of like dread and evil or darkness that everyone gets from these like weird, seemingly harmless things. You know what I
Yes.
mean?
Exactly.
And when I mean harmless, I just mean like, they don't have, a knife.
At times, almost fucking ridiculous acting.
Yeah.
They act like cartoons.
It's so bizarre. And they're fucking stick figures, for Christ's sake.
Yeah. Well, another post, this one again at the Fortean Times, happened in England once again.
Okay, interesting.
This was in 2010. The witness was in the town of Brockley, a southeast London suburb. Apparently, this area has a lot of trees and parts of it feel very much like a park. The witness was walking back to their apartment with a friend when they had their run-in, and here's what happened.
The word we coined later to describe its movement was lolloping, a kind of up-down bouncy walk. It took a few seconds for the two of us to realize this was no human being. I asked my friend, "See that man?" "Yes," was the reply. "It's not a man, though, is it?" I found myself asking. "No," said my friend, sounding scared. "It isn't." The creature was entirely black and like a cardboard cutout, flat and one-dimensional. It had no features at all, and it had arms that hung down to its knees. It seemed to be ignoring us. Then it seemed to realize we could see it, and it began to lollop faster towards us. We ran to my front door and hid in the hallway as quiet and unmoving as possible. When we saw the thing, we felt it was male. It approached the front door and appeared to look through the glass from the way its head moved up and down and around. It then turned away. We didn't sleep for some time after that, discussing what we saw. It was shaped like many descriptions of grays, but both myself and my friend came away with the impression that what we saw was either of this world or from another parallel dimension. To all intents and purposes, it appeared to be sauntering along the road, enjoying the walk before it became shocked to see us, staring at it in horror. We instinctively felt that it was not a creature to try and communicate with. This was not something that it was good to be near. We might have been wrong, but neither myself nor my friend would ever like to see this creature or others like it again, though I'd love to get some ideas on what it was.
So this one actually chased them to their door. Once
Yeah.
again, the phrase they use is kind of a lollop, like a gallop,
That freaks me out.
And once again, even though they said it was similar to what you would think of as a gray alien,
Yeah.
they got the impression that this was either of the Earth or interdimensional.
Okay, yeah. That's so interesting.
Yeah.
But still at the same time that it was, even though they did feel like it was of, from Earth or from another dimension, interesting that they still were able to compare it to a gray.
Exactly.
And some people think grays are interdimensional beings.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, who's to say anything at any time, anywhere?
Absolutely. Now, another poster on Reddit told of an encounter they had one night around 10 p.m. They were on their way home and decided to take a shortcut down a dark alley. Big fucking mistake.
Yikes.
Here's what happened.
The alley is pitch dark and pretty cold, too. The only lights were all the way down at the other end of the alley with some other lights as well. So we were halfway down this alley, and I started to get a weird feeling like I was being watched. But it was a different feeling because it's my instincts telling me I was for real being watched, but I thought I was just being paranoid. So we make our way down the alley into the light. I stopped and turned around, and my friends were looking at me. Right at that moment, that's when I saw it. Just coming into the light, a very tall, 8 or 9 feet tall, very dark, and very, very skinny creature, like a stick figure. And it was walking at us. I couldn't believe it at all. One of my friends began to say, "What the fuck?" When he was saying that, I ran as fast as I could. My friends ran behind me as well, thank God. We all made it out of the alley, so I turned around for one last time, and it was where I first saw it, standing. And there's no way, because I ran really, really fast, and nobody can be that fast at all. And the funny or worse thing is that it was still walking at us. We ran all the way home right after that. We talked about it in a group chat, not knowing what we saw at all.
These things, let me tell you, folks, are only going to get progressively freakier.
Yeah, I just feel a little crazy over here. I just feel like a lot of emotions because, when you first told me this, topic idea, I really thought that it was just going to be kind of like hacky, just kind of,
You thought it was going to be a fluff piece, huh?
Yeah, kind of. Like, I kind of thought it was just going to be kind of like silly and kind of funny and like whatever. And even at the very beginning of the episode, I still wasn't sold. I'm going to be honest. I gotta be honest with the citizens. With the citizens of the Milky Way, of course I'm gonna be honest.
Ooh, let me tell you something, folks. Your man Dylan is a connoisseur, a sommelier of the weird.
Yeah.
All right?
Yeah.
I don't do... Creep Street doesn't do fluff pieces, all right?
No. But basically what I'm saying is these things are genuinely really freaking me out and scaring me now.
Well, buckle up because it's about to get weirder.
Oh my God.
This next one is interesting because it happened in the middle of nowhere in the Rocky Mountains. This happened to folks who were real people of the mountains. It was around 2 a.m. and the witnesses were out setting fish traps in a remote stream somewhere in the Rocky Mountains. And this group of people, there was 5 of them total. And here is what they say happened.
After a buddy and I finished lowering a trap into the water, the atmosphere around us got real heavy. It felt like it was humid, but without the presence of moisture in the air. On top of that, our muscles suddenly felt really weak, as if we had just run a few miles with weights strapped to our back. My vision and the vision of my friends started to go blurry for a moment or two. When it all cleared up, we all noticed that something was not right. Off in the distance, no more than 20 yards away from us, was this tall, slender, pitch-black figure. It looked to be about 10 feet tall, and its limbs were really skinny looking. It just stood there for a moment, its limbs just moving around real slow-like as it looked at us. The creature had a head, but no real torso. Its body was as thick as its arms and its legs, and it had a real skinny-looking head with 2 bright white eyes. It just stared at us for the longest time. It didn't even make a noise. After a moment or so, the thing walked off to the side, and as it got farther away from us, it got easier to breathe, and we were able to move once more. Naturally, we packed our shit up and hightailed it back home. To this day, we don't speak of what happened, and we never did go back for our traps.
So now, 2 things.
Yeah.
This is the first time I think we've heard of eyes.
Yeah.
But 2, notice how people will get a sense of almost not paralyzed per se, but more just like frozen in place. Something that we hear happens a lot in UFO encounters.
Yes. And it is interesting because, and I honestly can't really pinpoint it. I don't really know why I feel this way. It's just kind of like a feeling I have where these things or entities or whatever, they kind of remind me of sleep paralysis.
Yes, a little
and, like,
bit.
Sleep paralysis demons. So I don't know. So maybe the kind of being, paralyzed or, stuck in place. I don't know. Maybe that has, I don't know.
I think you might be right. This next story was posted to a forum called True Ghost Stories Archive. Their encounter left them rattled and unsure how to deal with what they had experienced.
Yikes.
Here it goes.
I honestly thought I was crazy. I'm 33, level-headed, and while I won't rule anything out, I generally don't think much of the paranormal. The other night, morning maybe, I keep odd hours, I went outside for a smoke. My lawn has a low retaining wall about bench height and a long sloping road down to the creek, noted for its malfunctioning streetlights. I saw something walking down the middle of the road. I have a neighbor who walks at all hours, day or night, and I didn't think much of it. As it got closer, it looked like a pencil-drawn picture of a man done by a kid. It wasn't black so much as it was nebulous, like the static on a TV channel. Gray and black moving in a blur, in the shape of the sign that lets you know which door to go in. The streetlights flicked on and it stopped, looked around. I assume as much. All I saw was its head move, and it saw me. As soon as it did, it took off down the road faster than my eyes could follow. I didn't tell anyone for a few days. Then did the promise you won't think I'm crazy with my girlfriend. She said she had heard of similar stories and asked that I Google it. I did, and here I am. At least if I'm crazy, I'll have company.
So now we're hearing the static thing. This was big in
Yeah.
paranormal stories. Also, the way these things react to people, it's making me think of, do you remember a more recent episode of ours, Encounter at the Cowichan District Hospital, where, the flying saucer was right outside the hospital and the woman saw it.
Yeah.
And the people in the craft literally seemed to be shocked that she could see her.
Yeah. Yes.
Or that she could see them. Like, it's almost like these things are surprised.
Yeah.
Which might have something to do with the blurriness. Maybe typically it's a camouflage and for whatever reason.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's interesting.
But yeah, very interesting about the air, the static in the air.
Yeah.
Something similar happened in 1996 to a person named Ryan. Ryan was only 7 at the time and was living on a U.S. base in Germany with his parents. Very black-eyed kids. I'm just thinking about that one story we covered about the Marine that saw the black-eyed kid.
Oh, I know. That story is so scary.
Yes, like on a military base.
Yes.
Well, there were other kids who lived there, and the kids would always meet up to play. One of their games they often played was the classic hide and seek. Well, Ryan had been playing all day, and he went back home to rest briefly before heading back out again. This time, his attention was drawn to an underground parking ramp in the area. This garage was about 500 meters long, with 4 doors at one end where the cars would enter and exit. At the other end was an exit for pedestrians. As you can imagine, this being an underground parking ramp, even in the day, the place is very dark. And to this day, Ryan says he still doesn't know why he was drawn to enter that parking garage. He entered through the 3rd door, and right as he did, he began to feel a sense of unease. Since the place was vacant, Ryan began to shout into the parking ramp to amuse himself, hoping to hear an echo. Remember, he's only 7 years old. Give him some slack.
Yeah, come on.
Well, just then, something caught his eye. As it did, a chill swept over his body. At the far end of the garage stood a nightmarish, stick-like entity. He was able to see it somewhat clearly as sunlight was coming through one of the doors, illuminating it. The entity made no sound, as it appeared to be descending a flight of stairs. That's when it turned its head and looked right at Ryan. Both stood there in utter silence for several moments. Here's what Ryan says happened.
The feelings in me were telling me to leave the place now. While I was frozen in place because of the immense fear I felt, I could see it was completely black with no facial details. It just looked like a black stick man without any clothes on. Real slim in shape with long arms and legs, standing in place looking at me while holding the stairway grasp with its left arm. Around it, the air seemed like it was moving around. The same effect you have when the sun is really hot and burning the ground and you can see all kinds of air moving. It's that same effect that surrounded the black stick man. Then all of a sudden, the stick man turned around and ran out of the door incredibly fast, as if it was literally trying to flee from me. As if I wasn't supposed to see him there.
Well, Ryan took off running himself, obviously, right out of that creepy-ass parking garage. He ran all the way home and would not step foot outside again that day. Ryan further explains, saying,
I did not go back outside that day, and I was afraid of telling my family or anyone because I thought no one would believe my story. All in all, it was interesting but a very frightening experience with this phenomenon. I never saw it again, but I remember it well because it frightened me so much.
Wow.
Yikes. Wow.
Well, that same year, 1996, another encounter would happen, this time in Surrey, British Columbia, Canada.
Okay.
2 people were headed home after a vacation to the United States. They were driving north on the 184th at around 10:30 p.m. when suddenly their car just shut off and rolled to a stop. Where have we heard that before? But the surprise didn't stop there. They looked up to see a group of these stick-like entities gliding across the road. They were about 30 feet from their car. The beings moved in a gliding sort of motion, crossing the road from the right side to the left. As soon as the stickmen were out of sight, their car just turned on again, as if nothing had happened. Both witnesses were so shocked, they didn't even speak to each other at first. Another very similar sighting happened within a car, also at around 10:30 p.m. in the town of Curitiba, Brazil. 2 brothers were in their car driving home when one of them noticed a stick figure entity, but this one only about 2.5 feet in height, running straight at their vehicle. Both brothers were in shock, and they were alone. 3 other cars also happened to spot this thing. The brothers wasted no time putting the pedal to the metal and getting the hell out of there. Notice in the first one, the one I read before, the car stopped, much like many UFO stories of cars literally stopping.
Right.
And then this second one, this time the stick figure entity was only like 2.5 feet tall.
Yes. That makes it so much scarier in that, at least in that story.
They're versatile.
Yes. And also, I don't know, a lot of people say a lot of aliens are actually, a lot shorter than you would think.
Yeah, you're right.
I don't know.
Well, another sighting happened on Easter morning, April 5th, 2015, to a woman named Susan and her husband. It was about 9:30 a.m. that Easter morning, and the pair were driving to visit their daughter. It was pouring rain that morning, which was actually kind of weird as this was Southern California, and on top of that, the area had been going through an awful drought for some time. What's strange is that Susan saw this thing, but not her husband. Here's what Susan says happened.
All of a sudden, I saw dimly through the rain-battered windshield a thin, black figure about 12 feet tall, sprinting across the roadway from left to right, east to west. It was several car lengths ahead of us, seeming to dodge cars, yet lifting up off of the road. It disappeared down an embankment, and I didn't see it after that. Very strange. Now, this was in broad daylight, not in the dark shadows down some lonesome road. Therefore, it did not strike me as spooky or ominous. As it moved so quickly, it seemed to have some purpose or destination, or just an intent of getting out of the way of traffic. I remember I was more startled than afraid at what I saw, even though it was fleeting and subtle. Since I was in a moving car, there was no reason for fear, yet I still have questions.
Interesting. Once again, the husband can't see it?
Yeah. And I mean, what do you think the deal is with seeing something paranormal on the side of the road while you're driving?
I don't know.
Like,
I don't know what that is.
That?
My mother has an incredible story about something at the side of the road.
Yeah.
Well, I'll have to have her share that story.
Yeah.
I don't know what that is, but a few of these now have dealt with people driving and
there's-
crossing the road.
Right. And I mean, and so many ghost stories have to do with seeing a ghost on the side of the road.
Yes, absolutely. And maybe there's something about the act of crossing the road.
Right.
You remember, in many things we've covered, Nicholas Barker, the notorious Nicholas Barker, mentioned in his writings that he sent us that we shared last week about how don't jump a creek without looking both ways. Now, granted, that's talking about water, which water, as we know, has its own inherent supernatural properties.
Right.
But maybe it's also something about the act of crossing.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I'm reading too much into it.
No, but I mean, it's not necessarily because, I mean, that does have to do with a lot of things, because when you're crossing, you're neither here nor there. It's kind of you're in a interesting spot there. And also, yokai, a lot of them are associated with crossing.
Yeah.
And there's, of course, so many folk stories about things happening at crossroads.
Now let's look at an encounter from April 18th, 2015. This happened to a father and son. The son was 16 and he was driving home from work and his father was in the passenger seat. Well, they had gotten to the bottom of some hill and the son suddenly shouted out, "Did you see that?" But the dad didn't see it. The son claimed that as they were rounding the hill, he spotted what looked like a 9-foot-tall stickman-like figure hop over the guardrail and run very quickly across the road and then up the hillside on the other side. Here is what the father says happened next.
He said it took him a minute to even say anything to me because he was scared speechless. He says it was too tall and skinny to be a real person. We turned around at my insistence and drove back through, but saw nothing. We live in southwestern Pennsylvania in a fairly rural area. Where we saw him was a cow pasture on one side and a row of houses on the other. He ran up the hill toward the houses, according to my son. We do believe in the supernatural and watch lots of ghost hunter shows, but have never heard of anything like this.
Once again, crossing the street, and only one person saw it.
Yeah. It's weird that it's not seen. Well, sometimes there are multiple witnesses, but then sometimes there's not.
Yeah.
Huh.
Well, this next experience happened to a man named Cody and his friend. This was May 25th, 2015, and they were driving through the mountains of Idaho. They're driving along a dirt road, and they pulled into a gas station when all of a sudden Cody's friend shouted out, "What the hell?" Which was then followed closely by him saying, "Never mind." Cody just assumed his pal was playing around, so he got out of the car and, was going to go pump some gas. But that's when it happened. Here's what Cody says happened next.
I pulled up to the pump and got out. I took one step out of the car to the pump, and something made a very loud and scary noise from behind the pump, like a sort of clicking sound. And I saw the trees shake. I jumped into my car and took off as fast as I could. Later down the road, I saw it move quickly at my car from the edge of the road. I just kept driving. I didn't swear or anything. I kept silent about it until about 1 hour later. I told my friend what I thought I saw, and then he explained to me he saw the same thing standing at the pump, and it ran off when we were pulling in. He assumed it was his eyes playing tricks on him. The weird thing was, it killed my cell phone battery, messed with my car stereo, and made the lights on the pump grow very bright when it was near.
Both of them said how much the creature looked like a sort of stickman, and that's when Cody's friend began to cry. Now, the clicking noise, often associated with extraterrestrials, especially insectoid extraterrestrials or insectoid, whether they're cryptids or extraterrestrials. Yeah. Also noticed car battery, cell phone battery, and then like the lights on the pump grew bright, like it was getting a charge from this thing.
Wait, was that the end of the story?
Yes.
Oh my God, it just ended with his friend crying?
Well, the way it's described, it's not crying like he was so scared, or even though I'm sure he was. It was more like how people will express feeling these feelings that seem weird. He didn't even know why he was crying. He just started crying. He wasn't like meaning to cry.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Well, next let's hop on down to Charleston, South Carolina, where it's April of 2012. It's around 1 a.m. and a local woman named Sandy was sitting out on her porch enjoying the spring night air. Sandy lived on a farm and had 4 acres of woods on both sides of this farm and a little river nearby. Here's what Sandy says happened next.
I was looking out the door into the yard, and all of a sudden I saw movement in the yard, and my dog even saw something. He made a light bark, but he was just as confused as I was. He made only one little noise and then was just as mesmerized as I was, because in front of us there were 3 tall black stick figures gliding steadily across the yard. I watched them and wanted to go outside, but I was just frozen with amazement, saying, "Am I really seeing this?" I watched them glide across the yard, and it lasted a good 15 seconds. Then they just vanished into the tree line in the night.
Now, Sandy said her husband is like 6'3" tall, and these things were at least 1.5 feet taller than him.
Oh, that's so weird.
And, I think I'm 6'3", 6'2", 6'3", something like that, so.
Oh, God, that's so spooky.
Pretty dang tall. Here, she explains what happened further.
I grabbed a flashlight and went outside, just to the first step. I was a little nervous, but I had to know what I saw. These tall black stick figures were darker than the night. There was no light on in the yard or house where I was sitting. I could see them, no face, just black stick figures, long, skinny arms and fingers, and odd-shaped heads. They looked all the same height and all the same build, exactly alike. And they glided so effortlessly across the yard.
Once again, all this damn gliding talk.
Yeah, but it's like gliding, but then sometimes it's galloping, and then other times they're like really fast, and it's like, oh, I don't know what's going on.
So weird. Well, this next one concerns a woman named Laura who lives down in Australia. Her stickman encounters began after she moved into a new apartment in 2006. Though Laura had never felt threatened by this thing or had the sense that it was malevolent, the fact was this thing always seemed to be scared by her. Here's what she says.
He was 7 to 8 feet tall, and as soon as I entered the lounge room and saw him, he looked across the room at me, seemed startled, and ran around quickly, and then ran out of the room. After the encounter, I saw him 6 or 7 times, and sometimes I would encounter him walking quickly in the opposite direction in the corridor of my apartment. The sightings occurred either at night or the late afternoon/early evening, and I was never under the influence of any substance, being a non-drinker and a non-drug taker. He had no facial features. He was black and had an oval for a head and a thickish sticks for limbs. My partner, with whom I lived at the time, never saw the stickman. I was 40 years old when I saw him, and those sightings were the only inexplicable experiences I ever had. Those experiences changed the way in which I see the world. Today I know that the universe is much stranger than I could ever imagine. I have no doubt that what I saw was real.
Now this is interesting because this sounds more like the setup to a haunted house.
Yeah.
She moves into a new apartment, starts seeing this thing. Once again, it acts like a clown. When it was spotted, it ran around the room, flailing its arms until it ran out of the room. It literally sounds like a cartoon character.
Yeah, why is it doing that? But it's like, that's so scary to me that it's acting that way. That's so unsettling.
Very, very grinning man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
And once again, her partner never saw the thing.
Right.
Well, this next one's a weird one, folks, and it happened in Phoenix, Arizona. The witness was a man named Jordan. He was in his early 20s, only about 21 or 22 at the time. Well, Jordan was at a party with friends one night, and he was the designated driver, so he stopped drinking after only a couple beers. It was about 2 a.m., and Jordan was just outside enjoying the nice evening when he had his encounter. It was so bizarre that at first he thought he was hallucinating. Here's what he says happened.
I was hanging out in front of a friend's house when I looked down the street and saw a pole next to the streetlight. It was black, and it moved. When it moved, I realized the black pole I was looking at was connected to a body. It was a leg. This thing was at least 20 to 27 feet tall. As I looked up, I saw a stick body, and it proceeded to walk on the roof of the house it was next to and disappeared because of the angle I was seeing it. I only saw it for about 6 to 7 seconds. It made no sound. It was just floating along like it had something to do. I don't know how to describe it, but it looked as though it had intent, if that makes any sense, like it was doing something. This thing was massive. It was walking on top of the neighborhood houses. This experience changed my life.
So this one's a big boy, 20 to 27 feet tall. It can literally walk on rooftops just like it can take a step on a house like it's a step on a staircase.
Yeah, this is wild.
And
Like, now I'm like, is this even the same thing? Like, what?
and it makes no noise, like we know with UFOs. But
Yeah.
this thing is, if it's 20 to 27 feet tall, but you would think you would hear the thud of this massive, these ham hocks this thing's walking
Oh,
with.
yeah. But I mean, I guess not.
These gams.
Oh, brother.
Gams as tall as a light post.
Oh, gosh.
Hubba hubba. Now we jump to the town of Maureen, Illinois. It was 3 a.m. in the morning of December 12th, 2018. A guy was driving home from work north of Lebanon, Illinois on Highway 4. He was almost to Hunter School Road when something was caught in the headlights on the right side where it was crossing the road. He would later describe the creature as being a stick figure with 4 legs. It expanded across the entirety of the light from his headlights. He couldn't really see where it began or ended. This thing, though, was red. Here's what he says happened.
It turned to me when it was almost out of view and had no face, just like a stick.
This one walking on all 4s. How weird is that? And it was red.
The all fours thing. The red thing too, but the all fours is like, it's another thing where it's just like another detail, or it's just like, what the fuck? That it's just like, I don't get it at all.
Now, before I wrap up,
Okay.
this is something I wanted to tack on. It's most likely unrelated, but I thought, hey, it fit the theme.
Oh, yeah, and you never know.
Back in January of 2008, the Curiosity rover that NASA sent to Mars found something rather interesting.
Okay.
There were shapes in the rocks and dust that looked like stick figures. Here's a quote from someone at NASA who was tweeting out about this, and this is what they said.
Meanwhile, back on Mars, I'm checking out these stick-like figures. Each is about a 1/4 inch long. Maybe they're crystals? Or they could be minerals that filled spaces where crystals dissolved away. Stay tuned. Science continues.
Now, of course, NASA says it's most likely just a coincidence that the rocks ended up looking like that, or that just ended up looking like there was that pattern, but interesting nonetheless.
Very spooky. And it's one of those things where we're not saying that it's for sure stick figures on Mars. We're just saying, we don't know. We don't know. But what we do know is that, Dylan, you did a great job researching and getting all of these stories ready for this episode. And thank you so much for your hard work.
Hey, I appreciate it, but truly, there's not much out there. So really, the thanks goes to my sources.
I mean, God bless them.
Because, there's really not much other than these, one or maybe two articles on Mysterious Universe and then some other, blog posts. They're short little, paragraph-long things.
Right.
But there's no, real comprehensive literature on these things other than just people posting their experience.
Yeah, but you know what? That's okay. That's how it gets started.
Well, you know what, Maureen?
What?
I got a list of stick figures I wouldn't mind walking across the road with.
Whoa, okay.
Folks, give it on up for our top-tier Patreon subscribers. Of course, the Dream James Watkins, the Finnish Face Via Lundqvist, the Madman Marcus Hall, the Vivacious Vicky McHugh, the Tenacious Teresa Hackworth, the Heartbreak Kid Chris Hackworth, the oh-so-suave Sean Richardson, the British Bone Breaker Bex Martin, the Notorious Nicholas Barker, the Terrifying Taylor Lashmet, the Count of Cool Cameron Corliss, the Archduke of Attitude Adam Archer, the Sinister Sam Kiker, the Nightmare of New Zealand Noeline Vivilli, the Loathsome Johnny Love, the Carnivorous Kevin Bogey, the Killer Stud Carl Staub, the Firestarter Heather Carter, the Conqueror Christopher Damian Damaris, the Awfully Awesome Annie, the Murderous Maggie Leach, the Serve Sexy Sam Hackworth, the Evil Elizabeth Riley, Lauren Hellfire Hernandez Lopez, the Maniacal Laura Maynard, the Vicious Karen Van Buren, the Arch Nemesis Aaron Bird, the Sadistic Sergio Castillo, the Rapscallion Ryan Crum, the Beast Benjamin Huang, the Devilish Chris Doucette, the Psycho Sam, the Electric Emily Zhang, the Renegade Corey Ramos, the Crazed Carlos, the Antagonist Andrew Park, the Monstrous Michaela Schur, the Witchy Wonder J.P. Weimer, the Freaky Ben Forsyth, and the Barbaric Andrew Barry.
Whoa. Wow, that was amazing. I love listening and hearing those wonderful, righteous names. And thank you so much to all of our top-tier Patreon subscribers. We are so grateful for you, and we just couldn't do it without you. Thank you to all of our Patreon subscribers, and of course, thank you to all of you for listening today. We are so happy to have you here. And, if you're a fan of the show, if you're liking what you're getting, please, give us a like, a rating, 5 stars, a review, a subscribe, any of these things. It really does help us out. And yeah, just spread that good word. Spread the good word about Creep Street. Every little bit helps.
Citizens of the Milky Way, my name is Dylan Hackworth.
I'm Maureen Bogey.
Good night and goodbye.
Bye now.